And we're back, and it's COMP392, and it's week 5, lesson 5, part 1 of our winter 2016 semester. And I need to talk about a couple things. One, I want to discuss today your assignment number 2, which is due another week from now, right? Or a week and a bit. And it'll be due when you come back from your break. So just a reminder next week for those people who don't know somehow. I don't know, you guys probably know better than I do because you're so excited about being away from class and stuff like that. Next week is the break. So again, some people use it for studying, some people use it for just going places and doing things. But it'll be this assignment 2 will be due not next week, obviously, but the week after when you guys come back. And it'll be the solar system you're going to come up with. That's the idea, right? With proper lighting and some basic materials. Okay. So there's no quiz right now, but there will be a quiz on Wednesday, just as we talked about. Today what I want to talk about is this lab that I put together for you guys, and it's called Gulp Automation, right? That's what I named the lab. It's worth 2% of your final mark. It's due Wednesday, February the 10th at midnight, so that's this Wednesday at midnight. Now, I could have made it due tonight, right? But I figured I'd give you a couple days only because I know how these things go. And I know that when I've done this stuff in the past, right, with Gulp automation, it can be quite tricky to make it go, to make it work properly, and for you to put everything in place. Now, I've given you, in this particular case, and this is a little new this year, compared to other years I've done this kind of stuff, I've given you an example project, which should make it a little easier for you. This isn't supposed to be something to make you crazy or whatever, or it's not a test. It's just I want you to do it. I want you to actually create a project that automates. And we'll talk about what that is. Okay, in a second. So it's due tonight, and there's some kind of criteria to make it go. So again, it's if you look at the details inside the lab section here, the actual details here, just go open it up for you. Notice that it says use the example project from GitHub, right? And to create a new project, and I want you to call the project a specific name. So it's going to be called COMP392 Lab 3. Please don't call it anything else. And there's a reason for this, right? So just to keep all together, right? So let me go back up here. So that means it's going to be a new project. It's not going to be something that you're reusing or you've made before. We're going to make a really quick new project. We're going to base it on a previous project, right? And we're going to go from there. So you're going to do that. Then you're going to make a new repository for yourself in your own GitHub account. You're going to make a new one called COMP392 Lab 3, so I can look at that as well. And then you're going to actually auto-deploy. So it's an extra step. You've done this before a couple times now, and I'm keep making you do it so you get like really good with it. So it's like it's coming natural to you now. You know what to do already. This is just part of our workflow now for you to auto-deploy on Azure. So that way there's no question for you guys to do that with your assignment 2 and going forward. Even on your exam, I'm going to make you do Azure because you know what? This is all part of the workflow. Unless we have some kind of system failure that day, like where you can't access Azure or everyone's down, guaranteed for week 7 when we come back. So next week when we come back after next week's breaks, it'll be week 6. The week after that will be your exam, week 7. Guaranteed, I'll give you something to do in-house that day on the Wednesday. We'll do the review on this time slot here, right? On the Monday, and on the Wednesday when we get together, will be your exam for about an hour and a half, right? Where you'll have to take a little project, do a couple things that I ask you to do with Three.js and the whole tool set, and deploy to GitHub in class and auto-deploy to Azure, right? That'll be part of it. So I'm letting you know ahead of time, please, these labs give you a chance to practice. That's what the whole thing is, and get you ready for your exam, right? That's what it's all about. I want you to be very comfortable, right, deploying to GitHub. And that's why I'm doing that and to Azure as a result. So the 2 submissions that I need, if I was going to look at these 2 things that I need you to submit are, submit your GitHub link for this project, submit your live link from Azure. And you want to do this in a text file, are these 2 things. So let's talk about what this thing I'm talking about is, this Gulp stuff that I'm saying. So first of all, I'll start like this. How many people can make their Visual Studio Code transpile, right, every time? And how many times did you forget to do it? So you're like there and you do Command-Shift-B and then all of a sudden you forget to do it and something goes wrong. You're like, oh man, I forgot to transpile. Who's had that problem? Everyone has that problem. And I'll tell you right now, the reason why people have that problem is because It's just part of our workflow. I've taught you a workflow where, I say, hey, as soon as you're done saving your thing, the next thing you need to do is transpile, which is a manual process. If you forget to do that, to convert from TypeScript to JavaScript, you might get unexpected results. You're like, why didn't it work? It's supposed to work. Tom said it worked. Then you're, oh man, I forgot to transpile. So I want to get it to the point where you don't have to remember to transpile. It'll do it automatically for you, number one. And it'll do it automatically on you saving, just like we do in Visual Studio 2013, 2015. I want to get to that thing as well, to give you our true alternate from 2013 and 2015, number one. Second thing is, what about I want to have a live view. I don't want to keep going back and launching my website over and over again. I want to get a live instant update every single time I change something. I want my website to redeploy, to reload, basically is what I do. And it's called something called live reload that happens. In order for us to do that, both those two things, we have to create a task runner of tasks, and we're going to do that outside of Visual Studio Code. So that way, you can port these processes to any other IDE. If you want to use things like C9, Cloud9. You can transpile automatically without having to do transpilation on the command line. And it'll look through all of your files for you. So it'll solve the problems that people have with Cloud9 if you're a Cloud9 user, right? Because that's one of the kind of a pain in the ass, or a pain point, if you will, for people using a cloud service like Cloud9, right? And what if you don't want to use Visual Studio Code and you really love brackets because you've been using it in another course? So you can use brackets, and there are some really cool TypeScript plugins that you can use, so you can get TypeScript code hinting and code coloring and all that kind of stuff. But you can still auto transpile and everything else using Gulp. We're going to talk about this. All right, so there's a couple of reasons. Also, what about if you change something like this? I changed my HTML file, right? And you know what? I forgot to save it, and now I'm looking at an old file. Well, it'll take care of that too. So it'll watch the files, or the thing that I'm going to create with you. I'm going to explain it. It's going to watch your HTML files. It's going to watch your CSS files, and it's going to watch your JavaScript and TypeScript files. And anytime any one of those changes, it's going to retranspile everything and relaunch your browser. Okay, that's a really cool thing. So, and you might say, well, why is this so important, Tom? Well, when we start getting into more advanced stuff, like for example, when you start using Node.js, and if you're taking that emerging technologies class, like COMP208, right? 308, COMP308. What ends up happening is, there's a lot of stuff to change, and you want things to reload, and you don't want just to use NodeMon when you're in a production environment. You want to be able to use Gulp to automate a lot of your tasks. A lot of things that Gulp can do as well, and we'll talk about what Gulp is in a second, is it allows you to process languages like Sass and Less. For example, if you're using Sass and Less to do CSS, any kind of process languages, it'll automatically convert those into pure CSS and so on. You can also do things like, if you're using something like some kind of templating engine, like for example, if you're using Handlebars or EJS, Jade, one of those kind of things, it'll allow you to, when you change something in the template, it'll also update your websites and everything else, and you can do all that testing ahead of time. It'll be done automatically. So it's something that we've been doing now. I guess over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been doing a lot of automation in the workforce, and I need you guys to know about it because I think it's a good thing for you guys to understand when you guys go and work, and especially if you're talking in an interview, you talk about how you automate your workflow. You can also do a lot of stuff. I can't cover all of it today, but I will cover the basics of how to create watch tasks and all that kind of stuff. This could take all day, like the whole session today, right? It could be, depending on how fast we are, if we don't have a lot of questions, I could finish in an hour, and then you could be second hour, we'll do something else. But it takes a bit of time to set up. So to start off, what is Gulp, right? Because I think that's the thing that I was going to that people would ask. So if I go Gulp.js as an example, if I type in Gulp.js on the browser and I put it up, it'll come to this, and I've kind of shown you this before. We've talked about it very briefly, and I said, well, I can't handle it. And then I talked about it, I thought about it, and I talked to other professors as well, and it really is quite an important little technology. It doesn't have to be Gulp. There's also a competing one, an older one called Grunt, right? So there's a couple of automation tools. There's others as well, but those are the two big ones, Grunt and Gulp. Gulp is the newer one. And what does this allow you to do? If I go to Docs, just to see how you set it up, you set it up like any other module, right? So an example of this would be npm install -g, and you have to do this gulp CLI on the command line, right? That's the one thing you have to do. The other thing is, notice that not only do you have to do it on the command line, so you have to do this gulp CLI with a -g switch, right? Or -g. You also have to put it as part of your project dependencies. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can use the -save with npm, or you can use the -save -dev. And what that is it creates a development dependency, but not a project dependency. And it's really a separation. You don't have to do this. You can leave it with the -save like we always do, if that's confusing to you. But really, when we say -save -dev, it means this npm module we're using just for development purposes. We're not really using it as the final project, a dependency for the project. It's a dependency for our development build, right? And that's where, so for developers, they like to see the differentiation. We're going to make it so we're just use -save, and you guys can change that later on. So here on the website, it tells you what to do. We're going to make this new module, and we're going to use the require module syntax that we see in Node.js. And we haven't talked about Node.js, but Node.js is, again, it's a backend server environment that we use with JavaScript, right? So it gives us JavaScript on the server, as well how we're using JavaScript on the browser to do things like 3JS. With Node.js, we can use JavaScript on the server to serve up files just like we do with IIS, for example, in Azure, or if we're doing things with PHP, right? Instead of using PHP or IIS or other technologies in the backend, we can use Node.js to serve up JavaScript. But we're not going to use it for that. We're just going to use it as the dependency manager for npm. We're using npm to do that, to load it up for us. And we're using the require module, which allows us to load up this module and assign it to a variable where we can use the methods from this particular class, the classes involved with the Gulp module, to create tasks. That's what we're going to be doing, all right? So we're going to be talking about this. And there's a bunch of different methods that are built into Gulp. And if you want to look at specific API details, you can click on this documentation for the API if you wanted to look at that. And you can also look at the available plugins. Available plugins, if I go back, if I go click on plugins, there's a bunch of available and popular plugins, and they usually do it from alphabetical order. If you notice, there's a lot of stuff here alphabetical for each of the Gulp plugins. So using Gulp itself is not enough. We have to also include additional plugins to make our automation process work. So that's why it's a little bit more complex, all right? And this is an advanced topic for you guys, but anytime I have a course that has advanced in it, right? I'll be honest with you, like advanced graphics, advanced web programming, advanced whatever, right? I always include some kind of automation or some kind of ancillary technology like this. So you can take it away and you can actually make it useful, and it's useful for you in your in real life kind of workflows. Okay, so what do we do? So first, in order for us to start, before we get into how to use Gulp, I want to set up a project that we set up before. And remember last time we had this project. I'm just going to go into COMP392 for a second. Here's COMP392. We had a couple projects we've been using. One of the last ones we did, we kind of did this last day. We did this lesson 4 Azure. Remember that one? Lesson 4 Azure. Last 392. So if I was going to look at that thing, and if I was going to go into here and pull this down to see what lesson 4 Azure is all about, right? It is a basic project you can find up on my GitHub, right? Lesson 4 Azure. We're going to start with that one. But we're going to rename it, and we're going to kind of clean it up and make it a new project, right? We're going to make that one our base project. We're going to automate this one. So what does it include, right? To kind of look at this. It includes a core module that kind of shows us our game. Let's say what this thing is. It's actually creating some rotation, and it gives us the whole ambient light and the spotlight on the scene and a bunch of other stuff that we've seen before. So there's a bunch of TypeScript that we've got going on here, right? And what we want to do with it is we want to transpile this stuff. So if you wanted to download this project, please, this is what we're going to base your lab 3 on, right? So again, if you wanted to see where that is, if you go to GitHub, and if you look at Centennial College, and if you were to look at COMP392 from last week, right? Lesson 4 Azure from 7 days ago, you can see that I've got a little project you can certainly download.
I think it works on, like, they did that with network, so we can access GitHub. They're running timelines everywhere. like
I'm okay.
Can you do a more like on the zip?
Look, I'm here. Look, I'm kind of cool with that, right?
Just when I click download, so
It doesn't work.
it's not getting done.
That might be something else that's a problem. But I mean, I'm connected so far, and I'm still broadcasting, right? So I think we're still going with is what? Use command line for Git? There we go. You can always clone the command line. Yeah, you can always clone by and who remembers what that is? If I was going to go, let's just go back here. I'll stop this for a second. Who knows how to clone a repository using command line? Anybody? So it's like this. It's like if I go Git Clone, right? If you want to use command line. If you want to know the documentation for Git Clone, right? It really looks like this: Git Clone, and then it tells you the you have to be in the particular repository that you're in, right? They should give you some examples of how that is here. I wonder if they do, make it easy. But it's really Git Clone and then the URL, right? So the URI for this particular library you can find right here, right? This little GitHub repository right here. So you take this, copy it, right? And you can go Git Clone as an example. You can copy this to clipboard and then Git Clone and so on. Let's do that. I'll do it for you so you can see what it looks like. And I'll do that by putting it in on the desktop, right? So I'm going to go to the desktop here so you can see it. And let's just go to here and go to desktop. There it is. I'm on the desktop now, and I want to use that Git Clone command. So Git Clone. And I don't know the link, so I'm going to copy it from here, from online here, and then paste it in here, right? So when I paste it in, it looks like this: Git Clone, da 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 da, right? If I just press Enter, is that enough? Right, so it takes this thing off, and as soon as it does that, it downloads everything. It clones it onto my desktop, and I have it right here, COMP392 Lesson 4 Azure. So even if you can't click the download link for whatever reason, you can certainly Git Clone, and then the URI, and if GitHub is up, everything is good. Are we good? Is everyone with me? Because we're going to continue pretty fast after this. Remember, I want you guys to make your project out of this, right? So for me, what I'm going to do is I already have it. Here's my Lesson 4 Azure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this thing. For you, just copy and paste in the same folder and make sure that you rename it to something else. I'm just going to call this COMP392 Lab 3, just like I asked you to do. Right? So here's my Lab 3. So I made a COMP392 Lab 3 from that project. Right? Now I have to make a couple of changes because if I pull this into Visual Studio Code, here it is. Here's Visual Studio Code. I have some problems. One of them is, starting from the top. If I go to index.html, I got to change this to reflect that it's Lab 3. So I'm going to say COMP392 Lab 3. Let's change the name and the title. It's not a big deal, but I like to put that in. That's one. Notice that our title is missing a couple things. We don't have typically some stuff we're missing. Like one of them is we don't have our meta tags that we normally have in there. And you know what? Just to be nice and everything else, to make it so that you've done a couple things on your HTML, we're going to add them in after. So leave this alone for now. Leave them blank like this. We're going to add it later. We're going to change this so you can see how we reload our page when the HTML stuff changes. Okay. So that's the first place. Second place is in the README file. So instead of it saying COMP392 Azure, we're going to say COMP392 Lab 3. Right, Lab 3. Right. And then you're going to go into your bower.json file and change it there too, just to be, consistent. Lab 3. Lab 3. And even here, that's going to be your new link. Your new link is going to be whatever your link is. Make sure your home page is your GitHub, the new GitHub repository you're going to make, which I recommend Lab 3, right? So I haven't made mine yet, but I will. But I know it's going to be this. That's what it's going to be, right? So how do I make a Git repository? Again, I could do it from here locally, or I can go on GitHub. That's the best way to do it, of course. And I'm not going to use the tools. I'm just going to go back into here under Centennial College and make a new repository. And we're going to call it, for you it'd be different, but it'd be, for me it's Centennial College COMP392 Lab 3. And create my repository. Yay. I'm going to immediately do a couple things here, a little things we didn't do before. One, remember, I'm cloning mine, but it's my project. So whenever I go here, as an example, and I look at a project that I already have up, just to notice, to reiterate this, because I know people didn't get this last time. Notice that there's already a Git folder that's here, and this doesn't make any sense because this is linked to that other project, that lesson 4 Azure, and I need to kill it. I need to reinitialize my Git or kill my Git, and the best way to do that, of course, is to open this thing up in terminal on the Mac. On Windows machines you can do it too, but it's easier just to remove the folder that's hidden, right? So I'm going to do it on the Mac. I'm just going to say on the command line rm -rf, and then the .git folder for this lab, right? So this is gone. Now I notice that there is no updates here anymore. That's the one thing I wanted to do, right? Okay, I'm going to save all because I've made all my changes to initialize this little project, right? So I've got a shell for my project, right? That's what I wanted you to make. It doesn't matter what it is, but I'd like you to base it off this just so you know how to do it over and over again, right? Okay, and if you're not sure that this was right, like notice I just changed this to lab 3. Well, if you want to check that, you can see that it's just lab 3, right? Up to here, same stuff, just without the .git. Okay, let's connect it. And for now, what I want to do, right back in here, and if I go to my command line, I want to set up the Git repository locally first. So first, I'm going to use the clear command on the Mac or CLS on Windows. So CLS will clear you on Windows, right, in command prompt. So when I use clears the screen, and I'm going to say git. I've already done a git init, so git add dot, which it says, hey, not a Git repository. I forgot my git init. Sorry, git init, git add dot. There we go. Git commit -m, initial commit or first commit. Again, all this does is name all my my files that are going to the staging area here, and actually commits them all into that .git folder. Clear screen. And after I clear the screen, I want to connect it, and this time, just to be lazier than normal, I'm going to take both of these lines, not just one, but both of them, like this, copy them, go back over here, and paste them in together. So we say, paste, if I can do that. Let's try that again. So it was working, of course, at home, but of course here, I'm just being silly. And press enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to take those two last commands and push up the Git. So it'll have my latest version up on, if you wanted to follow along, if you're a little bit slower than I am, you can always go now to Centennial College COMP392 Lab 3. It's there as a basis for starting off. Yay, it's good, it's working, and we're good to go. I want to automatically, and I want you to get into the habit of doing this, and if you haven't done it already, I noticed that some people already did it. Hey, let's deploy this puppy right to Azure right away. Right, so we're going to go into portal.azure.com, and I'm going to log in there. And when I log in, I'm going to make a new little place for my files. A little container is what I like to call it for my website, right? It's empty right now, but it won't be in a second. I'm going to go to Web App. You've seen this before, so I'm going to go a little faster than normal. And I'm going to call this COMP392 Lab 3. Let's see if someone took it. Someone took it. That's okay. For the winter, so I'm going to do this again, winter 2016, right? Which is totally fine. And then I'm going to click Create. Well, as soon as I say it, someone's going to take it, right? Which is totally cool. I'm fine with it. I'm happy with it. Okay, so it's doing its little deployment dance. Notice that it's still doing this. I've got a bunch of little things I put up here. I'll clean them up eventually. But notice it's going to do its thing. It's going to deploy our little web app like we normally do. And this would have been what you need to do for last day, right? Like last deploy in Azure kind of thing. You would have, kind of gone to this point. I want to go down to my my publishing options and go to continuous deployments. I'm going to choose, like I normally do, GitHub, and after we choose GitHub, I'm going to choose my account type, which is Centennial, and then from there, I'm going to choose my project, which is going to be Lab 3, and then press OK. And what this is going to do is going to take stuff from GitHub and auto-deploy it right to Azure, right? And then once it's done auto-deploying, it looks like it's working nice and fast for me today. I don't know why, but it is. Azure's flying this morning, right, or this afternoon. And this is good. Let's just wait till this resolves here for a second. It's spinning away, right? And when it's done, I want to test it. And this is those 2 links that you need, right? Those 2 links, but you're not finished. You've got part of it right there. If you just give me these 2 links, I mean, you don't get marks yet because you still need to do the other stuff, the gulp stuff that we're talking about before, right? So let's wait till this evolves and finish this process, right? And I like to give Azure a little bit of time just to make sure. See, when I get this green check mark, I'm good to go. I'm happy, right? This is a happy check mark for me, right? I click on this to test it. That's the next one I want to do. 'Cause testing it is important, right? Because we want to see that this thing is working. There it is. Let's refresh just to make sure that this is the one that I wanted you to create, this little one here. Notice that there's just a little project that we want to make. Okay, cool. And if I do an inspect here in the kind of on the console, we can see all the stuff that's going on. Yay. Okay, cool. This is nice, but it isn't efficient if we always deploy to GitHub over and over again, because that means, especially when we come to putting textures on your images, it's a pain in the ass. You got to deploy to GitHub, or you have to run it in a server, or else you can't see your images, right? Like if I want to put a texture on the back on the ground here, as opposed to just a standard material, it won't show up locally. You have to deploy to a server like Azure or Heroku or someplace else. So we want to be able to do that locally, and we want to be able to test locally before we push it to Azure anyway. So here we go. We start with the automation. I want to direct you to a file that we're going to use again on Centennial College. It's part of your lab. If you look through this from last night, I forked it from my regular site. It's called Centennial College and then Typescript Gulp. Right? So I've already created a kind of a shell project. And notice that it's very similar in terms of structure. I made it like this on purpose for you guys. So you see the same structure and over again. So it's not something new, a new structure you have to adapt to, so we can save some time. All right, so going back to Gulp for a second. We need, in order for us to get Gulp going, if we follow the documentation, right, I need to install Gulp CLI globally. So let's do that first. So I'm going to go back to my command line here, and I'm going to clear the screen. And I'll just do it all again for you so you can see it. So I'm going to say, yes?
What's the file you want up on? Was it
Lab 3.
file or
Lab 3.
Lesson?
No lesson. COMP392 Lab 3 is what it's going to be on Azure, right?
No, which file are we working with? Are we working with Azure lesson?
Yeah, from last 4. Lesson 4, Azure. That one.
Okay.
COMP392 Lesson 4 Azure. That's the one that's the one I want you to work with. Now you could actually do other ones, but I'd like you to look at that one because we're going to change that one quite a bit. Okay, so let's talk about this. I want to do these lines here. So let's start together. So npm install, instead of minus global, just go minus g and then gulp -cli. So let's do that. So it's npm install, right, -g gulp -cli, and then press enter. And what this is going to do, it's going to go out there, grab gulp, right, on the command line, so you can do gulp commands, and it's going to put it on your command line, right? That's what it's going to do. There's a bit of an installation process. Yay, it gets all that and puts it on the command line. That should be done. You should be done by now, like me. I'm going to clear the screen. So that was the first one. 2, I'm here in Lab 3. It says install gulp as a dependency from my project, right? That's another thing altogether, right? So I'm not going to use the -save -dev dependency. Well, I could. It's not going to hurt me to do it either way. All this does is it puts it in a different place in the package.json file, right, called dev dependencies instead of just dependencies. And so it tells other developers that this is a developer dependency, not a project dependency. Like you don't need it to run your project. Your project will survive without Gulp, right? It's just the way we do things. So if I wanted to do this by the book, it's npm install. I'm on the project folder itself, and then it's -save -dev. If you want it to follow that process, gulp. And if I press enter, what it does is it goes and grabs the gulp for my project itself, right? There we go. Installs it locally, and it puts it inside of my my folder. Now notice how it gives me some warning. It says, hey, there's no such file or directory, users desktop package.json. What the? How can that be that there's no package.json file? Let's take a look. Because that's impossible, right? Here's my package.json. Oh, there isn't a package.json. He's right. So for that, how do I make a package.json? Because I got to make a package.json file for me to have new NPM modules. Because you guys haven't done NPM before, and I'm assuming that you have, right? Let's go do that. So let's fix this problem, and I'll do this command again. You can do it as many times as you want, by the way, right? So let's just clear the screen and fix that. The first thing, in order for us to get NPM modules, so we're going to use the node package manager, that's what NPM stands for, to grab modules, right? We're going to say npm init. That's the first command we're going to do. Notice that it's very much like Bower and TSD. It's all the same kind of flow. They almost look identical, right? They're just different dependency managers. So we're going to do this. We're going to say COMP392, and we're going to make it lowercase, lab3, because it won't accept uppercase. Enter. Version 1.00 is fine. We can accept that. Description, you probably want to put a description here. Like for this is like lab COMP392. You can put whatever description. Lab 3 for Centennial College. This just tells developers what your project is all about, right? Press enter. Entry point, it says index.js. You could certainly leave that as is. It's not true, because there is no entry point called index.js. And we're not going to run a node module here. We're going to call this, besides we have something called app.js or game.js, right? So let's use it game.js. Although we're not going to do it. There's no test command, so we're going to press enter. And notice how it picks up my Git repository right away, because I already have a Git file. Right? I've already kind of set up Git, right? There it is. And press enter. Keywords, I don't care about keywords because it's not going to be searched for. My author, put your name. So this is just a little, a little wizard. License is ISC is okay, or MIT, doesn't matter. Leave it as is. We don't care about licensing. And then is this okay? Press yes. And what it's going to do is going to go out and create a package.json file. Here it is. Here's our package.json file. Notice how it has a repository entry. Here's a repository entry. And it has a bunch of other stuff. It has scripts. Well, how do I test stuff? Dev dependencies, there's nothing in there, and there's no dependencies right now. Here's dependencies and dev dependencies. I don't have any of those. And what I want to do is get rid of some of this other stuff. Like, for example, I don't care about scripts, so let's get rid of this. And because I don't have a script to start my process, let's get rid of it altogether. Just clean this up. We can leave main at game.js. There is no game.js here, but that's what it is for now. But this is what your file should kind of look like. Okay, so we're setting up our own node module, if you will. That's what this is really doing. Okay, so package.json is the first thing you need, and if you're doing things with Node.js in the future, right, you need to npm init in order for you to automatically generate a package.json file. Okay, we have our bower.json file. That's what this is, and notice this should kind of match up with what the other side said. And now we kind of used an MIT license, which is probably what I should have done with my Node.js. Just copy MIT, copy it, and go back to my package.json, because we don't have two different licenses, and just paste in MIT, and that's fine. So it's the same. I'm just being semantic here. You don't really have to do any of this, because this is just for other developers to look at your stuff. Okay, so once you have a package.json, let's get back to that command line and do that again. So I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm going to do the same thing we did before. So npm install --save -dev for developer dependency, and we're going to install Gulp. Now, all this is going to do, if you've already done this, is going to just go back and do it again, but it's going to add Gulp as a developer dependency inside your package.json file. All right, so it's going to go through that. When it's done, if I notice that if I look at my package.json file, right, let's just go back in here, right? What it should show, which it doesn't, right? What it should show is your dev dependencies in here, right, for Gulp. Did you guys have that? Did it work for you?
Yes.
Yeah, for me somehow. Oh, maybe, how about if I save? Yeah, I know why, because I didn't save my package.json file. That's what it was, right? So my package, I was in the middle of saving, and that's why it didn't do it. So that's why it says compare, right? Compare, right? And this is what I want. Close. And we're going to discard the changes here. I'm just going to kind of discard the changes, right? Don't save, and I'll go back and fix that in a second. And if I go back to package.json, right, I'm going to change this to MIT, and I noticed that my gulp has a dependency of 3.91. Okay, good. So you guys are on the same page. So dev dependencies means, again, developer dependencies. Dependencies for the project is anything I want to load in here, right? And I don't have any of those yet, and I probably won't because we're not making a node module. If you're making node modules, you may have other ones in here, like node, right? And like other dependencies as well. Like for example, if you're making an Express portfolio site for whatever reason you're doing that, I don't know who would want to do one of those, right? But if you're making an Express portfolio site, then Express would probably be a dependency up here, right? Just saying. Okay, let's get to it. So we've done that piece. Now we need a gulp file, a gulp file.js. It's got to be in the root of your folder. So if I'm going to right click here, make a new file, we're going to call this gulp file, just like that. It needs to be named gulp file, gulpfile.js, JavaScript. This is pure JavaScript, right? Hey, I'm going to be using TSD and this whole thing. I want to get some code hinting without actually transpiling. One thing that Visual Studio allows you to do is, and this is the great thing about Visual Studio, so I encourage you to still use it right after this. Even though I'm not transpiling and I want to get code hinting, I can do that without having a TypeScript file. How do I do that? I need to use TSD, that's how. So let's go back to the drawing board here, press clear, and go TSD, right, install gulp -- save. Whoa, gulp. How am I doing gulp on the -- save? What is it doing? Well, what TSD does, right, notice how if I have my tsd.json file now, here's my TSD, and it's going through and it's going, hey, there's gulp. I'm going to add gulp in here into my TSD. Well, that's great. That means that I'm going to get code hinting for gulp and node, right inside my file. Let me prove that to you, right? So I'm going to go back to my gulp file.js, which is not a TS file, it's a JavaScript file. And I'm going to start off with the first command that you need to know for gulp, which is var gulp is equal to require, right? That is a node site. And if I press open brackets, it tells me it needs a string. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're getting this code hinting, this is right from the TypeScript definition files. But we're not even using a TypeScript file. We're using a JavaScript. We're still getting code hinting, which is really cool. All right, so I want to require, of course, in single quotes or double quotes, doesn't matter, gulp, right, which is the first thing we need. Gulp is really cool in that it has a bunch of stuff built in, a bunch of modules we need to use right away. And the great thing is we can set up some simple things in here very easily. So the first thing we need to do is set up a task, any normal task, right? And tasks can be named whatever you want them to be called, right? Whatever it is. So we're going to set up a new task. So we're going to say gulp dot, and notice the code hinting here, the first thing is task, right? And if I open brackets, it says, hey, for my task, I need a string and a series of dependencies for this task, right, if I want to, okay? And a callback function. Ooh, callback functions. You're going to see a callback function used for the first time here, properly in this course. And we'll talk about the difference between a callback function and a regular function. We've been using regular functions so far in JavaScript, but we want to talk about a callback function or an anonymous function. That's what we're making, right? So we named the task, all right? And let's call this task as an example. We'll just call it example, okay, for now. And then we need a callback function. So with this task, when we call the example task, it needs to do something, right? It needs to do something. So let's do that. So we'll say function, right? And what it will do is inside is will be an inline function or anonymous function that's written right here. This is what it looks like when you make a task. Like this. Is this foreign to you? It might be for some people. What it is this. This function, which is an inline or anonymous function, also called callback function, that's what this thing is, right? It says this, when I call the example gulp tasks, right, I'm going to run everything that's inside this function automatically. That's what it's doing. Okay? So if you haven't seen this thing before, I'm just explaining it so you see it. All right, cool. And you know what? There is a really cool little another module that I want you to load up right away called Gulp Util. How do I load that in? Well, go back to the command line for a second, because I don't want to just start there. I want to clear this up, right? And I want to do this. I want to say npm install --save -dev, right? And then I'll say gulp-util, right? Gulp-util. This is going to go right into your folder again. This is just for inside your folder. And it's going to put it in some place called node modules. This is where all this stuff is going, right? So I'm going to press enter, and it's going to go out, grab Gulp Util, right? Grab Gulp Util, and it's going to basically say, it's going to spit out, you know, it's going to put Gulp Util in here. Well, notice that it goes inside this folder called node modules, and there's a bunch of node modules that just got put in here. We don't want these node modules ever going to GitHub, because they're just like regular node modules. These are development dependencies, right, that we can always use later on, right? And notice in my git ignore file, if I go to my git ignore file here, I have node modules as something that git ignore will ignore. I don't want that to go up to GitHub ever. Same thing with Bower components, but in this case, we've renamed it to scripts lib, so it doesn't matter. All right, so that's the first thing. So node modules also live inside this node modules folder, and all we've done here for node is in my package.json file, I have 2 dev dependencies now. One gulp, which is here, and it lists another one, Gulp Util, which is another one that we're going to load in. Yes?
How do you do the git ignore from C9? I know that,
Gitignore.c9. You put it inside your C9. You want to ignore the .c9 stuff?
no, like there's a git ignore in it, but
So click onto it.
you can't actually read the file.
Just ignore it. You can't?
No. it's
Oh.
weird.
You should. Well, we'll go over it later. I'll show you in the break. All right. So, because it shouldn't be an issue. All right. So notice that I've got 2 dependencies that are listed here inside my package.json file. And it was automatically generated, right? All right. Cool. Hey, we just did another module, and I want to get code hinting for this module. So what am I going to do? TSD. So I'm going to go back to TSD. I'm going to say TSD. Look how it's going to kind of mirror this. TSD install, right? And it's going to be gulp-util and then --save. Press enter. It's going to go out and grab this thing, right? Gulp Util plus a bunch of other ones, because once you need one, one depends on another one. It's going to grab a bunch of little dependencies for my type definition library for Gulp Util. And one of the things that Gulp Util is used for is to actually show things on the command line. But I'm talking about on the command prompt, not on the command line in your browser. Because remember, every time we do things for Node, console.logs happen on the command line, not on the command prompt. It's just FYI, right? So let's take a look at that. If I go back here and I say, well, you know what? I need to create another object for my Gulp Util module, and I'm just going to call it gutil. So var, we're going to call this gutil for Gulp Util, right? And that's going to be equal to require, right? Gulp-util, right? And once I've done that, it's going to create another object, right? That's going to be based off this new module, and people who don't understand what I'm doing, I'll explain in a second, right? That I can use all the methods and stuff off. So if I want to do something with gutil, I could type in inside my gulp task, gutil dot, and it's going to give me a bunch of options here, right? A bunch of options that I can call up. And if you don't know what those are, right? If you don't know what gutil does, I can always look it up. So if ever I give you a module name, something you don't know how to do, you can always look it up and say gulp-gutil, or sorry, util, gulp-util, and if you look at the Gulp Util module, right, if I click this one here, this npm module, it's going to show you how to use it, right? So it says var gutil, require Gulp Util, right? And then I can do one of this, Gulp Util or gutil.log, which is going to send things to the log, and I can kind of put up a message, which is the first thing I want to do. Gulp gutil log is what I want. Let's do that. So I'm going to go back into here, just to demonstrate this, and I go gutil.log, here it is, and if I open it up, it says message, and there's a couple of other things, or some other optional parameters. So I want to put it a log, instead of console.log, I'm going to use gutil.log, and I'm going to say something like example started, right? That's what I want to do, right? So there's my example little gulp task, right? And I will put a little comment in here, say example task, right? That's what this is. Here, up here, what we're really doing is, you know, we're getting we're adding additional modules, right? So we're adding, you know, our required modules to the project, right? That's what's happening here. And we're only doing it for Gulp. So let's recap what we've done here. We have to download gulp-CLI with npm. npm being the node package manager. If you're going to use Node.js, right? And we use Node.js not just to create servers and everything else, but also to do some JavaScript, kind of create JavaScript dependencies for our projects, or add JavaScript modularity or functionality to our projects. Okay, that's number one. We did that. Then we downloaded a couple of new modules, Gulp and Gulp Util, that are developer dependencies for our project. Right? Those are the two things. And then the way you use them is use the .task method to create new tasks. You can call this task whatever you want in here, right? With an adjoining anonymous callback function that runs every time I call up the example task. Then I use gutil, which is Gulp Util, which is a short form of it. And I'm using the log method to show something on the command prompt. That's what this is doing. Okay, are you all with me? Okay, here's how it goes. If I go back to the command prompt and I want to check this little task out, I can do something like this: gulp example, and then press enter. And notice what it does. It says, using gulp file, desktop, COMP392, COMP392, this user is going to be different than mine. Starting example, it says, and then it says example started, that's the gutil output, right? And then it's going to say finished example after 1.12 milliseconds. So what have I done? I've gone to the command line, I've gone into my gulp file, and I'm running my task, right? Now I'm doing it manually. I don't want to do it manually. I want to get it so we can do it automagically, right? And in order for that to happen, we need to do some other things. But this is the first task you're writing in Gulp, because we're creating a task to do stuff for us, right? Like example, we want to use a task to watch our TypeScript files. So when the TypeScript file changes, we transpile automatically, right, into JavaScript, which is going to help you out a lot for Cloud 9. Because I can tell the pain you're going to have if you don't know this. You have to go through every TypeScript file manually and go TSC and the name of the file, right? And sometimes it doesn't work because TypeScript is a problem. Hey, here's something you can do. We kind of loaded in some other modules with TypeScript before to set up in our setup. What if I want to have TypeScript, right, local to my project, right? Like you might need, as an example. Well, I can do that, and let's load that in. Let's just, for the sake of having TypeScript, another module to show you this. I'm going to go clear, and I'm going to say npm install. Right now, this is again, it's a developer dependency to have TypeScript, because if you don't have TypeScript in here, you can't transpile. But it's not going to kill your project if you can't do TypeScript inside your module. So I can put it as developer dependency, but let's leave it as a regular dependency. So we'll say npm install TypeScript -- save. And what this does, it goes out to grab the latest version of TypeScript, 1.75, and actually includes it inside your project locally. So if I go to package.json now, I can see that there's two types of dependencies. One is a dependency that I need, TypeScript 1.75, and the other one is a dev dependency, which is just for my Gulp automation processes, right? Cool. So that means that TypeScript lives inside my modules, which means I can call it from inside my modules, and it'll be the latest version as opposed to the one that's on the command line, which might help you as well, right? Okay, so I've done a couple things here. So when in our gulpfile.js, we have our first task, but it's kind of a silly task, right? We want to make it so that it's a real task, like it actually does something. Like an example would be, we have other kinds of tasks that we can do, right? And I'm going to direct you, instead of going through, typing each one out and going through all of them. Again, I have this project that I kind of created up online for you. I want you to look at it. We have a gulp file.js under this project called Centennial College TypeScript Gulp, right? Instead of going through all this stuff one by one. And let's take a look at what I got here. So now you should be able to understand what I'm doing. I've got a bunch of other gulp that I'm using, a bunch of other gulp tasks. So if you look at this example, I'll leave this up for a second. Yes? Because you need to do npm install gulp minus g, and then it's going to be gulp -cli. You won't find gulp on the command line unless you do an npm install -g gulp -cli, and then you can do your gulp commands. Okay, cool. So I want to install some other ones, and I want you to go through it and install these ones that you see here. So I want you to install debug, inject, gulp TypeScript, source maps, up to here for sure, connect, right? Basically what you see here on the first part, these lines here, these modules, I want you to type them all. And I'll make this bigger so you guys can see it, because these, instead of me going through each one by one, I want you to just grab all these dependencies now. So go ahead. It'll be npm install and then tsd install if you can. You're going to see some that aren't going to be available through tsd. Like for example, gulp connect won't be available, unfortunately. Okay, and I'll go through them and what they do. To get gulp going? Yeah, so the first thing, if you go to the Gulp website here, if I go to Gulp, the first thing it says is npm install -g gulp -cli. You need to do this one or else you can't do gulp. Right? That's the first thing. And then the other one is you need to do this next piece. Yes? It's just for our type definition library. Just for our code hinting. That's all it's for. Right? And we need that. So let me go back to that so you can see that module for a second. Oops. I'm installing it for this so you can see it. I'm showing it to you. You don't need to. If it's real life, you may not use them or not. But I'm using them because I want to get code hinting. Yes?
Do we have to just install them under the developer?
No.
Or it doesn't matter?
No, it doesn't matter. It's really the way you want to structure your project. Okay, so here's the stuff I want to add. So let me add this stuff in. I'm just going to cut and paste or copy and paste. I'm just going to grab all this stuff here, and I'll explain it in a second. I'm going to copy all these pieces here. I need these before I can do this. I need the modules though, right? Otherwise, it won't work. So I'm going to go back into my project, and notice that I only have these two lines up here. I'm just going to put in the next pieces, right? There it is. There's my next pieces in there. But they're gonna error out. All these ones are not gonna work because I don't have Gulp Debug, Gulp Inject, Gulp TypeScript, Gulp Source Maps. This one's something else. I want to talk about this one, TSC config. This is a different thing with our TSC project, right? We don't have Gulp Connect, we don't have Gulp Open, and I'll explain what all these things do. All right, I'll save this thing. But I'm gonna go to my command line here and add all these modules in based on what I see over here, right? So let's take a look. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna say npm install, right? And it's going to be gulp-debug, right? Gulp-debug, that's the next one. And it's going to be -save, -dev. Because I want to put them in the dev dependencies. Now you don't have to. You can just leave it as -save like you were just asking, right? And it's okay. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt your project or it's not going to work. It's just a matter of what you tell, when a developer looks at your stuff, what's going on? What are these things? Do I need them or not? Because they may choose not to use them. Okay, press enter. It's going to grab Gulp Debug and put it inside your node modules. Let's do the next one. So npm install, and you can do them a bunch at the same time, right? I can do them all in one line. Let's try that. So I'm going to say clear, and I'll do the next one. So npm install, right? Gulp inject, Gulp TypeScript, all at once. Gulp source maps, right? I can't do tsconfig. Line 8 is not going to happen. Gulp connect, right? And gulp open. There we go. And then it's -save, -dev. So I'm going to do it all in one line because npm allows you to do that just like TSD. just like Bower, right? And if I press enter here, it's going to go out, grab all those dependencies, and update my package.json file, right? So it includes all that stuff. I'm just taking all these one at a time. The only thing I didn't take is line 8, because that's another thing we're doing here. All right, so I just downloaded all those dependencies. That's all it does. If I was to look at my, it's this. I did this. That's what I did. I put this whole line in here. I'll leave it up for you guys to see it. So it's all one. You don't have to do it all one. You can do one at a time, but why? Right? If you can do it all together, it saves you time, right? By the way, if you've already installed a module, don't be afraid to install it again. All it's going to do is going to check to see if you've got the latest version, and it's going to overwrite your module, your npm module in the node modules folder again. It's just going to reinstall it, right? So it's not going to hurt you typically. Now there might be some projects you work on in the future. Notice I just did this all at once, but you don't have to. You can break it up one by one, hey guys? There might be some projects in the future that you don't want this stuff to happen automatically. You want to make sure that you retain the project or the version number, right? And that's why package.json allows you to do that. Okay, cool. So I've done that. I'm not going to do it again. I already did this piece. I'm going to do my TSD now, right? And I want to show you, I want to do them one at a time. So there's some stuff that's not going to work. So TSD install. I want to get some code in for everything. So Gulp Debug, right? So Gulp-debug. Let's see if that exists. -- save. They don't all exist, guys, because that's like a type definition of a file, and there is the one for this one, Gulp Debug, right? Let's do the next one. TSD install, right? Gulp-inject, right? -- save. You don't need this right now. I'm using Gulp inject as we're going to use it later on in the course, right? And this one we do need for today. We're going to say TSD install, right? Gulp Typescript. Ooh, that's that. We need that one for sure. -- save, right? Because that will give us the code hinting for Gulp Typescript. There it is. And we'll do TSD install Gulp Source maps. That's going to generate our source maps for us automatically. -- save, right? So if that exists, we'll go out and grab those two files. And then the one that doesn't work is Gulp Connect and Gulp Open. Let's see if that works. It didn't work for me yesterday. TSD, when I was putting this project together. TSD install, right? Gulp Connect, -- save, and it didn't work for me last day. It says 0 results. And the other one that didn't work is Gulp Open. TSD install. Remember, TSD only has type definitions for most popular libraries, right? Gulp Open, -- save. And this one probably will fail too. That's okay. So if you get these failures, it's okay because I'm getting them. They don't exist. The type definitions don't exist. You won't get code hinting for those two things. But I've tried to get you code hinting for most things. That's all it is, just for code hinting, code coloring. All right. So we've got our dependencies in place, and I want to start using the next piece. I want to explain this next line here to understand. So a lot of times what happens is Gulp has two pieces to it. Take a look. Gulp has something called Gulp Source. And what Gulp Source does is it's the source path for where you're looking, usually. So Gulp Source. And you also have something called Gulp Destination, Gulp Dest. Those are two methods that are built into Gulp, right? That you don't have to do anything with. So instead of me typing this stuff over and over again, because this is just a string, or a string that basically looks for all ts.ts scripts inside the scripts folder. That's what it does. All .ts scripts, all TypeScript scripts. And the other one is all typings. I want to look at all of them too to create my TypeScript, to give me my code hinting here properly, and to compare with my TSC, right? My TypeScript when I compile. I want this inside of an array. Here's an array of two strings. Here's the first string, and here's the second string, right? And it's called TypeScript Sources. So I'm going to include this instead of typing it all. So I'm going to go back to my module here and pull this up here. I'm going to pull this so you can see, kind of a side-by-side. And so you can see how I'm building this out, right? So I don't need this task anymore. Let's get rid of this Gulp task, this little funny task I made. So we're going to make this. I'm going to call this TypeScript Sources. So TypeScript Sources is just going to be a string array of two strings, right? Just two paths that are in for our TypeScript. The next one is HTML sources. So I'm not only going to transpile TypeScript, but I also want to update my HTML. I want to look to see all HTML, and notice that the way we look at the root folder is ./. That is the pathing that we use with Node, right? So ./ says, look at the root folder, and then anything that matches .html, we want to start, that's part of our path, our HTML sources. So I'm going to grab these two, and notice the same thing for our CSS sources. I'm looking in the content folder, and I'm looking at anything that matches that .css, right? Again, guys, if you want to follow along, this is up on GitHub on TypeScript or Centennial College, TypeScript Gulp, and then you want to look at gulpfile.js. All right, so I'm going to kind of copy these two things, copy, and go back into my files here. And just underneath my TypeScript sources, I'm going to copy those two things. Yay! So I've got a couple of source variables that keep track of my source of my paths for different kinds of files I want to look at. I want to look at TypeScript files, I want to look at HTML files, and I want to look at CSS files. Those are the three types of files. Okay, cool. Save that. Here's our first task, and this is a transpile task. We'll just write this one first, and let me explain this one so you have an idea of what's going on here. Okay, in this one, it's going to do the following. I'm using my gulp task. I'm calling it transpile. That's my name that I made, transpile, right? I have an anonymous function that runs from here to here, right? That's what this thing does, right? I'm going to do a gulp Util log. It's going to say transpiling. That's all it's going to be. Now here's the tricky stuff that you haven't seen before, and this is kind of the way Gulp works. I'm going to say here's my TypeScript result. That's what this is, right? My TypeScript result is equal to, I'm going to look at the Gulp sources, which is the TypeScript sources. There's two source paths. I'm going to look at there. I'm going to get the path for that source, and then I'm going to use something called a pipe method, right? That's built into Gulp as well, to pipe it into something called source maps. Remember, we got source maps up here. Source maps has its own API documentation. And when we use sourcemaps.init, we pipe the TS source maps into here. So part of the transpilation process is to create my source maps, right? So it's going to do it for me. That's the first pipe. Then I pipe it, the same information, I send it, piping means send it. Send my path into source maps, which is the module that I need to create my source maps. Don't worry about how exactly it's done right now. I want you just to understand each line, what it's doing, okay? Here's something you've seen before, TSC. That means TypeScript compile. That's what it means, stand for. The TypeScript compiler, I'm going to send not only to source maps, but I'm also going to send it to my TypeScript compiler and send in the path for my TypeScript. Now, guess what it's going to take? It's going to take these two paths and say, take a look at the first one. That's what the TypeScript compiler does. The first one is the path to all my TypeScript files that I want to look at, transpile. And the second one is my type definition libraries to help me compile all the TypeScript. That's what it does. Okay, and then the last one is just, if you have an error, then pipe it out to the log, right? So this is basically when you have an error, this is just an event handler. When I have an error, show it on the command line. That's what it means. That's my first piece. So this is the gulp task. And here's the second one. Now that I've got a TS result object, right, I'm going to use another special thing that's built into my TypeScript definition library right here. I'm going to pipe, that's why I'm not going to do this by hand because it's going to take too long, right? I'm going to pipe my result into my destination. So I'm going to look in my scripts folder, that's what it's going to say. And what I want to do is I want to concatenate, right? I want to concatenate my source maps, right? And the stuff that I've got, I'm going to write my source maps inside that folder. That's what it's saying, right? And I'm going to take all my transpiled files, my JavaScript files, and I'm going to write them into my scripts folder. The same folder, wherever I got them from, I'm going to write them into. So if I look into a scripts lib folder or a scripts objects folder or a scripts some other folder that's inside scripts, it's going wherever I take my TS file is where I'm going to put in my JS file. That's what this is doing, right? Again, I'm going to check for errors. And I want you to not do this piece. Don't do the connect piece. The last piece, I don't want you to do that because in order for you to do the connect, we have to do some other stuff here. So let me just grab all this stuff here to show you what it is. And I'm just for now, I'm going to omit the connect piece, right? So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back here. And underneath my Visual Studio Code here, starting on line 21, I'm going to just paste. And I'm going to get rid of connect. And I'm just going to put a semicolon after the last on error. right? So it's going to look like this. Okay, so this is where we can take a short break, and I'm going to upload this to GitHub so you can see what's going on, right? All right, so what is this all doing, and what is forget this? These are all my dependency, the modules that I need for my dependencies. Okay, that's the first thing. So these things don't touch. These things are the things that we need to make this whole process go, right? And you might say this is involved, but guys, I want you to be exposed to Gulp. I don't need you to know every single process, because for me to do Gulp, we need a couple of lessons to do everything about Gulp, right? So I just want you to see what Gulp does with this process. Okay, cool. And if you follow this, if you just copy exactly what I got here, right, this is what you're going to get. Okay, I'm going to go back to my command line now, right? And I can do one of these. Gulp transpile, right? And press enter. And what it's going to do, it's going to go out to my folders and transpile all my TypeScript files into JavaScript. That right there is everything you need to make your process. If you just stopped right there and you didn't do anything else, if you're a C9 or Cloud9 user, you're golden now. That's going to make your process way better than it was before, right? Because it's going to transpile, do all your source maps, everything else you had before. Done. Right? Which is what you were missing. Okay? So, and I know a lot of people are using Cloud9, right? Not just here, but in other courses. And so, of course, I make these videos so that other people can look at them, right? And I promised that I would do it, so this is kind of part of that. I'm going to take a short break, 5 minutes. When we come back, I'm going to finish this off and talk about what the other things do and how they work, right? In order for me to make that Gulp stuff work. But in order for me to do that, I'm going to do a git add dot and a git commit -m, and I'm going to say added transpile task to gulp file.js. And then I'm going to say git push origin master, which is going to push everything up to Git. And you're also going to see things up on Azure, but there's no change to Azure because I haven't changed anything on my end. All right? So let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll finish this off.